Everyone thinks they know how Whitney Houston's story ends. But that version skips something important. Someone important. For years, one person stayed close to Whitney before fame, during fame, and through the chaos that followed. She watched the rise happen from the inside. She saw the pressure build in real time. And when everything collapsed, her voice was missing from the story people accepted as truth. By the end of this, the story you thought you knew won't disappear. It will feel unfinished. The story everyone thought they knew. Most people think they already know how Whitney Houston's story ends. Ask around and the answer usually comes fast. Addiction, a troubled marriage, a spiral that felt inevitable in hindsight. Over time, that version became familiar enough to feel complete. News clips replayed the same phrases. Magazine covers leaned on the same photos. Commentaries circled the same names. The repetition did the work. When a story is told the same way for long enough, it stops sounding like a theory and starts feeling like fact. Bobby Brown sits at the center of that public memory. Not because every detail points to him, but because his name stayed in circulation. Interviews framed him as chaos. Headlines treated him as shorthand. Even when blame was softened, the associations stuck. Over the years, that framing flattened a complicated life into something easier to digest. Grief turned into a narrative loop. The more it repeated, the less space there was for anything else. That loop shaped how people talked about Whitney after she was gone. The conversation focused on decline rather than development, on collapse rather than construction, on what went wrong rather than what had been built with discipline, focus, and care. Complexity faded because it slowed the story down. Spectacle moved faster, and the faster the story moved, the more it relied on familiar cues. What rarely came up was the idea that something important had been left out, not erased in a dramatic way, not hidden behind locked doors, simply pushed aside because it did not fit the rhythm of the narrative. Certain names appeared briefly, then vanished. Certain relationships were referenced without being explored. Over time, those gaps stopped being noticed. That's where Robin Crawford exists in this story. Not as a surprise reveal, not as a forgotten stranger. She was always there, right on the edge of the frame, in early photos, in behind-the-scenes footage, in credits and acknowledgments that few people paid attention to. For years, she remained a constant presence in Whitney's life, while barely registering in the public one. The strange part is not that Robin stayed quiet. Many people close to Whitney did. The strange part is how easily her silence became invisible. Someone who shared decades with Whitney somehow became a footnote. Someone who knew her before fame, during fame, and through crisis rarely got a sentence of her own. That absence matters because stories are shaped as much by what is excluded as by what is repeated. Two girls before the spotlight. Long before stadiums, awards, and contracts, Whitney Houston and Robin Crawford were just two teenagers navigating ordinary days in East Orange, New Jersey. There were no cameras tracking their movements, no expectations attached to their names. Their world was built around routines that felt small at the time, but ended up shaping everything. Summer jobs, shared commutes, long conversations that stretched past what was necessary. Whitney stood out even then. She carried herself with purpose. She talked about the future as something she planned to reach, not something she hoped might happen. Music mattered to her, but so did control. She paid attention to how people moved, how they spoke, how opportunities opened and closed. That focus showed up early. People around her noticed it. Robin noticed it most. Robin's role in those early years was quiet but steady. She observed more than she performed. She listened more than she pushed. Where Whitney had momentum, Robin provided balance. Their connection grew through proximity and trust rather than intensity. They showed up for work together. They spent downtime together. The bond formed in the space between responsibility and rest. As their friendship deepened, emotional closeness followed naturally. Robin became the person Whitney leaned on when decisions felt heavy. When doubts surfaced, Robin absorbed them without judgment. That support mattered because Whitney already felt pressure building even before fame arrived. Being close to someone who did not ask for more than honesty made that pressure manageable. Physical intimacy entered their relationship without fanfare. It was not framed as rebellion or performance. It was private and unspoken outside of their shared space. Neither of them treated it as an announcement about identity. It existed within the boundaries they set for themselves. That containment kept it safe, at least for a while. Those boundaries were shaped by more than personal preference. Faith played a role. Family expectations played a role. Whitney carried both with her, even in moments of closeness. She had been raised with clear lines about what was acceptable and what carried consequences. Those beliefs did not disappear when she felt love. They stayed active, creating internal tension that never fully settled. That tension reached a turning point when Whitney decided to step back from the physical side of the relationship. The moment is often reduced to a single image, the Bible placed in Robin's hands. What mattered more was the meaning behind it. Whitney was not rejecting Robin. She was responding to fear, responsibility, and the future she believed awaited her. She worried about discovery. She worried about disappointment. She worried about how much harder her path could become. Robin understood what was being asked, even if it hurt. The relationship shifted rather than ended. Emotional intimacy remained. Trust remained. But something had changed shape, and shape matters. Once boundaries move, they leave traces behind. Fame enters the room and changes the balance. Once Whitney's career started moving fast, everything around her changed speed too. The days filled up. The phone stopped ringing for fun and started ringing for business. Decisions that once felt personal turned professional overnight. Managers stepped in. Family voices grew louder. Executives arrived with schedules, expectations, and deadlines. Every hour began to matter because every hour could turn into money, leverage, or exposure. In that environment, influence became crowded. Everyone around Whitney believed they were helping, protecting, or guiding her. Some were sincere, some were strategic. All of them wanted access. When momentum builds, people don't ask for space. They compete for proximity. That competition quietly reshapes relationships, especially the ones that existed before success. Robin's role did not change during this time. She did the same thing she always had. She watched Whitney closely. She noticed patterns. She paid attention to mood shifts, stress signals, and moments when Whitney needed to pull back. What changed was how others reacted to that closeness. Familiarity started looking suspicious to people who had arrived later. Comfort started looking like control. History started looking like leverage. That is how Robin became both essential and inconvenient. Whitney trusted her instincts. She leaned on her when pressure spiked. She looked for her when rooms felt overwhelming. That kind of access made other people uneasy. They did not share it. They could not manage it. So they redefined it. Words started circulating. Opportunist, distraction, threat. Once those words appeared, they no longer needed proof. Repetition did the work. No one sat Whitney down and explained this shift clearly. It happened through tone changes, through who got invited into meetings, through side conversations that stopped when Robin walked in. The environment grew less tolerant of emotional autonomy. Whitney was expected to be available, agreeable, and aligned. Robin represented a version of Whitney that did not belong to the machine. That difference mattered. Inside Whitney, a quiet split began to form. She wanted closeness. She wanted safety. She also wanted approval. She wanted to meet expectations without losing herself. Success did not ease that tension. It sharpened it. The higher she climbed, the harder it became to balance private needs with public demands. Robin became the place where that pressure released, which only deepened resentment from others who wanted exclusive influence. This is the stage where Bobby Brown enters Whitney's life. Not as an instant disruption, but as an accelerant. The fractures were already there. Fame had created them. Bobby's arrival simply sped things up. His presence changed the chemistry of the room, and from that moment forward, balance became harder to maintain. Marriage, control, and escalating isolation. Whitney's marriage to Bobby Brown reshaped her emotional landscape almost immediately. The relationship moved fast and burned hot. Bobby carried intensity wherever he went. Attention followed him, and he expected it to stay with him. Sharing space had never been his strength. Sharing influence felt impossible. From early on, he resisted anyone who had deep access to Whitney, especially Robin. His discomfort was not about ideology or rumors, it was territorial. Whitney was his wife now, and he wanted that status to come with exclusivity. Robin represented continuity from a life before him, and that continuity felt threatening. Competing loyalties began forming around Whitney, pulling her in different directions. Every interaction turned into negotiation. Every decision required emotional management. Specific moments made the tension visible. After the honeymoon, Robin noticed a cut on Whitney's face that did not line up with the explanation given. The detail mattered, but Robin chose restraint. She did not interrogate. She did not push. She understood that confronting Whitney too hard could shut her down completely. Respecting Whitney's choices meant absorbing concern without forcing resolution. Arguments between Whitney and Bobby grew louder and more frequent. Robin saw the strain building. She saw emotional harm alongside physical signs. Still, she stayed measured. Her loyalty focused on presence rather than control. She remained available without demanding change. That patience came from understanding Whitney's pride and independence. Pressuring her would have driven her further inward. Bobby's behavior continued shifting. Confrontations turned more direct. Intimidation replaced frustration. Attempts to remove Robin from Whitney's orbit became explicit. There were heated exchanges. Moments where Bobby stepped into Robin's space physically. Whitney found herself stuck between defending her marriage and protecting her closest confidant. The tension drained her. Whitney resisted fully cutting Robin off. That resistance mattered. It showed she still needed that connection. But resistance also came at a cost. Each time Whitney tried to hold both worlds together, the pressure increased. Isolation did not arrive all at once. It layered itself. Whitney still had people around her, but fewer people she could speak to freely. Fewer people who knew what she was thinking without explanation. Drugs, fear, and the cost of staying. By the time drugs became impossible to ignore, they were already woven into Whitney's daily life. They did not arrive suddenly or announce themselves as the central problem. They showed up as a coping tool in a space that kept tightening. Robin noticed the pattern clearly. When Bobby was around, usage increased. The pauses disappeared. The hesitation faded. It became easier to reach for something that dulled the edges than to confront what was happening inside the marriage. Robin did not approach the situation with lectures or ultimatums. She tried slowing things down instead. Small comments, gentle reminders, suggestions that now might be a good time to pull back. Whitney never denied what was happening. She acknowledged it. She spoke about it openly at times. But acknowledgement did not lead to action. The words came without follow-through. Delay became the default response. That delay mattered. It allowed situations to escalate without intervention. Violence moved from implied to visible. The Atlanta hotel incident marked a clear turning point. Whitney went there expecting connection. What she encountered was rage. Bobby spat in her face, he threw objects. When she tried to call her father, he ripped the phone away and struck her with it. The room became a trap. There was nowhere to go and no one to step in. Robin heard about this, not through rumor, but through proximity. She saw the aftermath. She absorbed the details without adding commentary. Humiliation, control, isolation. Each piece added weight to a pattern that had already been forming. Whitney was being cut off from support while being told she was loved. That contradiction eroded her ability to protect herself. As these incidents accumulated, fear entered Robin's calculations. It did not arrive as panic. It arrived as awareness. Family pressure increased. Voices that once tolerated Robin's presence turned openly hostile. Then came the alleged threat involving Whitney's father and a former security guard. The claim itself mattered less than its effect. The possibility of harm shifted the equation entirely. Robin had spent years prioritizing Whitney's needs over her own. Now she had to ask a different question. Could loyalty still function if staying put meant real danger? The environment had changed. Control was no longer subtle. Intimidation was no longer abstract. Protecting Whitney no longer looked like standing beside her at all costs. The realization came quietly. Staying might no longer help. Staying might make things worse. Presence could now be used against Whitney rather than for her. That awareness carried its own weight. It meant accepting that love does not always equal proximity. Sometimes it demands distance. Walking away and the aftermath no one saw. Robin's decision to leave did not come from a single argument or dramatic confrontation. It came from exhaustion that had nowhere left to go. Years of absorbing chaos, managing tension, and staying alert finally took their toll. The Fred Siegel incident captured the state of things perfectly. A simple gesture turned into a full eruption. Rage spilled out without direction. Logic had no place in the room. Substance use, paranoia, and misplaced anger collided. Robin recognized the pattern instantly. This was no longer a space where reason could land. Trying to fix things had become part of the damage. Staying meant accepting abuse from multiple directions while watching Whitney slip further out of reach. When Robin resigned from her role, the break was clean. No drawn-out negotiations. No public explanation. The weight of the moment came from what it removed. Whitney lost the one person who had consistently grounded her through every phase of her life. Robin lost her daily purpose, her proximity, and the identity she had built around protection. The separation did not bring relief. It brought silence. Robin stepped into a life that felt hollow without Whitney's presence. She watched from a distance as headlines grew harsher. Photos told stories the media shaped without restraint. Whitney's body became a talking point. Her health turned into speculation. Cruelty passed for concern. Robin carried guilt without agency. She no longer had access. She no longer had influence. She could see what was happening, but had no way to intervene. The distance did not stop the worry. It amplified. Every article felt personal. Every rumor reopened old questions about whether leaving had come too soon or too late. What the public never saw was this quiet aftermath. No interviews, no explanations, just a former protector watching events unfold without the ability to change course. The absence hurt in a different way than staying ever had. There was no chaos, only helplessness. Death, grief, and the demand for answers. The call did not come with preparation. It came like most life-changing news does, without warning and without context. Robin heard the words and felt them stall in her body before her mind could catch up. Whitney Houston was gone. The detail that followed made everything worse. Water, a bathtub, a place Whitney had always loved. Swimming had been joy for her. It had been comfort. Hearing that water was involved made the loss feel unreal and cruel at the same time. Robin's first reaction was disbelief, not denial. Disbelief has weight. It sits in the chest and refuses to move. She replayed old memories without meaning to. Poolside laughter, long swims, Whitney's ease in water. Those images collided with the final headline, and the collision hurt more than the words themselves. Grief did not rush in loudly. It pressed inward. The world moved faster than she could. News alerts fired off within minutes. Television anchors slipped into familiar tones. Social media filled the gaps with speculation before facts had time to breathe. The same narratives returned immediately, polished and ready. Addiction, marriage, downfall. The ending had already been written, and it was being read aloud everywhere. Bobby Brown spoke publicly, addressing blame and responsibility. His words circulated widely. Some people accepted them, some challenged them. All of it fed the cycle. Alongside that, the old rumors resurfaced again. Questions about Whitney's sexuality returned to the spotlight as if they had been waiting. Robin watched this unfold, knowing that the woman she loved was being reduced to fragments that felt incomplete. She stayed silent through most of it. That silence was familiar. For years, staying quiet had felt like protection. Speaking out had felt risky. Silence had been her way of keeping Whitney's private life from becoming public property. But now, Whitney was gone, and the silence began to feel heavier. It started to feel like agreement even when it was not. Grief lived in private spaces for Robin. It showed up in pauses, in moments when she caught herself reaching for the phone, in the absence of shared rituals that had defined her adult life. Public grief, on the other hand, felt loud and rushed. It demanded explanations before emotions could settle. It rewarded certainty even when certainty did not exist. That difference created a deep internal conflict. Robin understood that people wanted answers. She wanted them too. But the version of Whitney being remembered felt narrow. It skipped the discipline. It skipped the kindness. It skipped the years of focus that built a career people admired. It lingered on the ending and ignored the foundation. The question that followed her everywhere was simple and unbearable. Who gets to define someone once they are gone? The loudest voices often win. Repetition carries authority. Silence leaves space that others fill quickly. Robin realized that staying quiet now might allow a story she knew was incomplete to harden permanently.